Elton John song, played on Tumbleweed. Yes, Connection. Leslie Duncan. Oh, beautiful song. Have your eyes really seen? Do you know what I mean? Those words resonated with me when I knew what the topic was for today. But I'm going to begin with the 7 wonders of the world. So you all know what those are, right? Of course they do. But I'm going to give you what I have found, that a group of American school children were asked to list what they thought were the present 7 wonders of the world. And there were some disagreements, but the following received the most votes. You ready? Egypt's Great Pyramids, the Grand Canyon, the Taj Mahal. I've been there. That place is that's beyond words. Panama Canal, and some of you might have been to some of these sites. The Empire State Building, that might have been a while back. St. Peter's Basilica, and the Great Wall of China. When gathering the notes, the teacher noted that one student hadn't finished her paper yet. So she asked the little girl, "Are you having trouble making your list?" And she said, "Yes, just a little. I couldn't make up my mind because there's so many." The teacher said, "Well, tell us what you have and maybe we can help." The girl hesitated and she said, "Well, I think the 7 wonders of the world are to see, to hear, to feel, to touch, to taste, to laugh, to love." I don't know about you, but I just get the God bumps just saying those words. So, the room was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, and it was just that way now. We sometimes take for granted that the things that we have are so much greater than anything that is man-made, humankind made. And that taps into today's topic. The word is understanding. We have been studying the 12 spiritual abilities or powers that were formulated by Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity. And he basically saw everyone and everything in the Bible as a symbol of a part of ourselves. It's fascinating to see the Bible from that viewpoint. And he looked at the 12 disciples, and he came to the idea that each disciple represented a different trait, and that we all have these traits inside of us, and we're probably unaware of them. And so the 12 powers became his study that has been expounded upon by other writers to say, how is that power in me? How do I use that power in a positive, constructive way? Or sometimes we can use it in a destructive way. So here's the thing. We're here to become more enlightened about the powers that we have, and not just to know them, but to use them. So we're in month 5, and you've already been on a journey, many of you, on these 12 powers. So what are the powers? The first one was imagination. Very good. And the second one in February was love. Right? You have to have imagination to get outside of the box of our very limited thinking. You got to have love because life is about love. Okay, then we take that imagination and that love, what we would love, and we have to apply faith. That's right. To believe that the impossible is possible. And then last month we studied the power of our will. And that's where we have the power to make choices, to make commitments, and to become more willing and open than to be willful. So we're going to study this month the power of understanding. And the definition of understanding is to comprehend and interpret knowledge, to make cognitive connections. Again, it's to comprehend and interpret knowledge and to make cognitive connections. So the word that stuck out to me when I was reading that is the word connections. And I started thinking about connections. Life is all about connections. We're either connected or we're not. And when you start looking at everything in life, and I want you to look at that this week, connections. Where are you connected and where do you find some discontent? Content is it discontent? You probably have discontent when you're disconnected. I mean, look at it. You go physically. We are physically connected. How do you physically connect? We have mental connections when we have one thing, like learning a new language. But we have to learn the words, and we have these connections. How something works, cognitive connections. There's emotional connections. I don't know about you, but I took a period of my life where I shut down or repressed my feelings because I didn't want to feel some things. So I put them down. I wasn't connecting to my emotions. Now I'm better at that. But you ever been in that point where you've been disconnected emotionally, or met or know somebody who is or appears that way? You have relationship connections. You know, when you're having a great connection, you have friendship, you have marriage. But when you're disconnected, you have divorce, you get disconnected, right? There's a disconnect. There's social, there's family, when you have family gatherings and you're in harmony, or there's fights, which just leads me to the word communication. You either communicate and there's a connection, but when there's no connection in your communication, you have disagreements, you have fights, not willing to see each other's point of view. Everything in life is a connection based. Even when you're on life support and someone has to make the decision to disconnect from a machine. Life is connections, period. So again, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework, as I always like to do, something to contemplate besides God first, which was your assignment in the beginning of the service. But where am I connected? When I started thinking about it, it really kind of took me into more thoughts about it. Now, why do you want to know what your connections are and why they're not? It's because you want to have AA. And that's not Alcoholics Anonymous. But there's AA. And all spiritual masters are simply AA. Who would like to know what AA is? Most of you. Okay, I'll tell you. AA stands for spiritual masters are aware, they have awareness, and awake. That's period. They're aware and they're awake. How aware and awake am I, is my question to myself. We want to wake up. We want to awaken from the illusions and the dreams and the fear-based thinking in our society and our cultures that we've been taught. Don Miguel Ruiz calls it domestication, when we have been, all these ideas and thoughts and beliefs that we carry that came in from childhood that may not be true. We need to question those. And when we awaken from the dream, we can awaken to the truth that we are divine beings, that everyone and everything is spirit, God, the divine in expression. That is core principle number 1 from Unity's core principles. So here's the question for you and me, because we're all one. How awake are you? How awake are you? Is it 30% of the time? 50, 75, 100% of the time? Are you awake to the truth that we are the divine in expression? Now, this is not to cast judgment on yourself. Judgment is not, Jesus, the great reassurer, said, judge not. Okay? It's not about judgment. It's about awareness. Because when I become aware that I am not awake, then I have the possibility of becoming more awake to the truth that the divine and God is all there is. So the question is, I'll start with childhood beliefs. We all started as a child. What were your beliefs as a child about God? Possibly, was it a bearded man who was up in the sky looking down and watching you? He knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good, so you be good by goodness sake. Well, that was for Santa, but you might as well apply it to God, because God's watching you. And how about perhaps you had a belief, a teaching that you're a sinner, and the only way you're going to heaven after you die, of course, is that you profess that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and He died for your sins. That's the only way that you're going to get out of damnation and hell. Perhaps you had that as your upbringing, okay? There's a lot of ways that we could maybe have seen what the divine is. This is actually part of the homework that the people that are taking How to Pray Without Talking to God class are entertaining and looking at. So the question is, are your beliefs as a child the same beliefs you have now? I hope not. Unless you had really good ones. I did not sense. So here's the thing. We constantly evolve, or we have the opportunity to evolve in what we think and see the divine to be. We can gain a greater understanding of what God is. Okay? So it's about understanding more of what the divine is. And I'm applying that specifically to 3 things today, this having a greater spiritual understanding. And that is, what is your concept of God? And who are you, and how do you pray? These 3 are essential in the spiritual community to have an understanding of and where you are now. The homework assignment, one assignment that the class was given, is to make a list of what God is. And you put at the top of the page, God is. And then you write down all the things God is. Okay? And then you add some more every day. Because you got to see, where are you now? What is your definition of what God is? You got to start there. Next, you can ask, where is God, by the way? In the sky? In the earth? Is it in the trees? In the air? In the chair you're sitting on? Is it in you? Is it in a murderer? Yeah, I said murderer. That's right. Because we profess that God is all there is. That is what we say. The divine is all there is. That could be really hard when you see things that you don't agree with. I remember being in India, and we had to go through the entire day saying, this too is the divine. Things that I don't consider divine, because I have a picture of what the divine needs to look like. It's light. It's not darkness. But darkness, there is no such thing. It's the absence of light. This is about spiritual understanding, to grow our idea and picture of what spirit is. Because everything is connected to that. What your beliefs about the divine is affects how you move through life, how you see yourself, how you pray. It's essential to know what it is that you believe. And are you open to something greater? Are you knowing that you could perhaps evolve? I'm always having these opportunities to evolve. As a minister, you'd think that I would never know it all. In fact, I don't want to know it all, because, but that's the egocentric part of understanding, being a know-it-all. So, understanding what the divine is important. Is God your protector? When I ask that, is it something that protects you? Is God who you pray to for help, for guidance? Do you pray to God for healing? Do you pray to God for financial freedom and abundance? Do you pray to God for peace of mind? Do you pray to God for health and healing? And how about happy, harmonious relationships? Is this your God? Do you pray to? Who do you pray to? And why? How to pray without talking to God has a premise that is Reverend Linda Martella Whitsett. She is the author of that book. She's also the author of Divine Audacity. Both books I highly recommend. Divine Audacity is about the 12 powers, and she breaks the 12 powers into each one into 3 parts. For understanding, she talks about the 3 parts being comprehension, realization, and insight. Today, I'm going to talk about the comprehension. What does comprehend mean? Well, comprehension is when we internalize and live the truth that we know it. She says, comprehension is the ability for us to connect, discover those connections again between our thoughts and our feelings, between our body's messages and our habits of thought. None of you have any of those. Between accumulated beliefs and the unadulterated truth. See, I want to live in truth, not on the beliefs that I have come to believe. She continues to say that we learn about the aspects of our own divinity when we listen to life. You know, in 12-step programs, they often do a life review. Comprehension is about listening to your life. A life review, she says, a hallmark of recovery programs and other personal development systems, shines a spotlight on our long-held beliefs, our patterns of thought, and our habits of behavior. By activating our power of understanding, we see the past in a context of wholeness. We can see our lives differently. Charles Fillmore taught that there are 2 ways of getting understanding. One is by following the guidance of spirit that dwells within, and the other is to go blindly ahead and learn by hard experience. Anybody? You know, taking the time, she says, to reflect and listen to my life, I was able to comprehend aspects of my divine identity. The divine identity is important. Learning, studying, reflecting, meditating all reward us with a growing sense of spiritual comprehension. Learning, studying, meditating, and reflecting, those 4 things help us to comprehend. One of the things, and I think it always comes through by our studies. What are you studying? Are you studying? Are you involved in any sort of study, spiritual study? To grow your understanding, it means to study, to comprehend, to take things deeper, to question things. That's why teaching this class is really important, and I recommend, if you haven't signed up and if you can, sign up for the class. At least get the book, or get this book. The other book that I would also recommend is The 5 Principles by Ellen Davenport. Because again, as I study, the understanding is when you get the, I got it. I've been studying for a while. I have just recently understood Jesus in a context that I hadn't gotten before, because it was so easy to read about someone else. But Jesus is who I am. He's the teacher inside of us. The teacher inside of every one of us is called the Christ, or the I amness. It's our teacher. The teacher within is always, and the conversations that Jesus has, he's talking to different aspects of himself. You know, the Bible is basically a self-help, self-talk book. If you look at every part of that book as, that's a part of me too, yes. That's how you're going to gain spiritual understanding. And you'll be like, oh my God, I had never seen it that way. When Jesus is doing his prayers, he's not talking to God, the Father. He's talking to the parts of himself. It's his higher self that he's talking to. I call it God's self. I've had conversations with God's self, and I'll tell you what, she's pretty smart, right? And someday I'll have a workshop here called The Still Small Voice, where we'll get more involved in that piece. So, Understanding what the divine is, that it's in you and that it's in me. Principle number 2. What is it? Come on, you know it. I know, I put him on a spot. Pop quiz. Okay, what is it? We're talking the 5 principles. God is all there is. Number 2, get the book, 5 principles. We taught this in January, but that was 3 months ago. And we are the divine in expression. Okay, we are the divine in expression. How much do you believe that? And do you believe that 100% of the time, or only when you're in church? Or only when you're meditating? Are you in the full and total AA, awareness and awakeness, that I'm the divine and so is everybody else 100% of the time? I don't think so. If you are, then good for you. I aspire to be that, because the great way showers, the spiritual masters, understood. They had the spiritual understanding. And did it come in a flash? No. Jesus, the great way shower, I'm pretty sure spent some years in India, and he learned from those people. He studied. He didn't just wake up and he became aware of the truth. He was a great metaphysician teaching us that, don't you know that you are God's? And we tend to go, yeah, right. And if we were the divine in expression, how would we behave? How would we talk to ourselves? How would we be with each other? Kind and compassionate and understanding one another. So how do we become more aware? How do we become more aware? Tell me. You've already heard me say it. How do we become more understanding and aware? Study. Yes. We're going to study. And again, how to pray without talking to God. Charles Fillmore says, it is your mission. Okay? Did you know you have a mission? Do you know what your mission is? I know mine is, I'm a clear and open channel of and as God's perfect love and work in the world. That came from Spirit. I tried in many workshops to come up with that. And then one day, after spending some time with my prayer practitioner, it just came in. And it was just like, oh, I don't even know what it means. but I do know that I'm a clear and open channel of and as God's perfect love and work in the world. I said, okay, God, let's do this. The God self that I am. So your mission is to express all that you can imagine God to be. You can attain to everything you can imagine. If you can imagine it's possible for God, it is also possible to you. Do you believe that? We have the hearts of divine love. We have the minds of divine wisdom. We have the lives of divine life. Since the divine is not a person, it is a principle. We are made in the divine image. Therefore, we are the love principle. We are the wisdom principle, and we are the life principle. We identify ourselves as these principles. We claim our divine identity. There's a true story about a community of monks, and they learned that there was a road that was going to be built right where they had this shrine to this gigantic clay statue of Buddha. So they called in a crane. The crane came and attempted to pick it up, but it was way too heavy. And it actually put some cracks into this clay statue of Buddha. So they said, okay, we got to get a bigger crane. Well, the crane wasn't going to come until the next day. So it was going to rain that night, so they covered up the clay Buddha and went to bed. Well, in the middle of the night, one of the monks got up. He wanted to check on the Buddha statue, make sure it was okay. So he takes his lantern out, and he pulls back the coverings, and he notices that there's something shining in some of the cracks on the Buddha. And now he's curious, so he goes back and he gets a little chisel and a hammer, and he chisels a little bit. And then he goes, oh my God. So he runs back, wakes up the whole community. They come out, they bring their chisels and hammers, and they find underneath that clay, there was a solid gold statue of the Buddha. It had been there all the time. It had been encased in clay to protect it and to keep it from being taken when they were having wars. Okay? We are like that Buddha. We are encased. We are the golden Buddha. Charles Fillmore says, we are all in personality wearing the mask that conceals the real, the spiritual I am. Our external identities are like the clay surrounding the golden Buddha. We have crafted these in personalities so that we can get along with others. But we don't know who we are. That's a shame, and that's what we need to wake up to. All the while we're walking around with this clay on us. We're here to chisel that off and to see and to know that every person that you see is the golden Buddha. When you look in the mirror, see the golden Buddha. It is who and what we are. Underneath all this clay, our divine identity is intact, complete, and immutable. All that you ever need is contained within. And you do not have to go in search of it as though you had gotten separated from it. Listen to this. You are not divine at potential. You are not divine potential, but the fullness of divine nature. In any moment, you can realize and live from your divine identity. You do not have to acquire your divine identity. You only have to mature in your understanding of this true identity and claim it. When you understand that you are the divine, you don't pray to God. You never pray to God. You pray from God consciousness. That's huge. I pray from God consciousness. This book tells you how to pray without talking to God, to talk from that consciousness. You want to increase your spiritual understanding, get the book, take the class, or find some avenue of study, because I want us to rise up in consciousness and transform lives and heal the planet, beginning with one person at a time, and that begins with me. Let's make those connections. We can do it. We're doing it because we're here. We can connect to the golden Buddha within. We can be the connection that we all long to be. We are the connection. And we could be the rainbow connection. So, for our connections and our spiritual understanding, let it be. And so it is.